Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortmaster, and welcome back to another Andrew Cunningham reaction. My reaction to him breaking down the Gaster's motif in, all of Deltarune's music was a lot more popular than I thought it was going to be. And I got a couple of people suggesting that I react to more of his stuff, which I was going to anyway, but they were pushing me towards seeing what was so good about Undertale anyway, a mildly deranged retrospective. Which, I mean, thinking about it, what was so good about Undertale? I mean, granted, I had never heard of Undertale before it was actually released, even though it did have the build-up from like Kickstarter and all that, but just thinking about it, the different kind of playstyle where you can be like a pacifist and not have to kill anything, and also just the writing in general. I mean, at least not that I can remember, that was sort of the first big example of that when it came to like PC gaming, because I know like Undertale has a lot of things based off of like Mother and Earthbound and stuff like that, but I mean, at least for me, that's the first time I really heard of stuff like that on like Steam and on the PC and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, that's why I would say Undertale was that good, where it was like a breath of fresh air in a market that really hadn't had stuff like that in at least a very long time. And also with, an audience that, like me, most likely had never played a game like that before. But yeah, I'm excited to see more of Andrew's stuff. So let's see it then, shall we? Of course, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner of video will lead to my Let's Play of the day. And with all that out of the way, let's get this thing actually started then, shall we?
Oh, okay. So, be me.
Oh no.
You're a university student. Third year, somehow, despite spending the first quarter of your degree, as well as your entire senior year of high school, in the grips of well beyond pathological Undertale fandom. It's after dark on a damp winter evening, and you and a friend have decided to walk home together after a late class. At some point, you stop at a Tim Hortons. The restaurant is nearly empty at this hour, and so you feel only a slight twinge of irrational embarrassment as the conversation quickly worms its way down ever more niche alleys and byways.
Of course.
Specific thoughts on game aesthetics are discussed. The plot of Death Stranding is bitterly lamented. Then,
I never got any Death Stranding.
Naturally from the prior discussion, your friend asks you a question you weren't quite prepared for. What was so good about Undertale, anyway? This is not a statement of contrarianism. The individual sitting across from you has known you for many years. He knows what you were like in high school.
Oh no!
What he is asking is not why Undertale rose to mainstream success, nor whether it deserved the praise heaped onto it. He's asking how it managed to visibly derail your life for the better part of 2 years. This is a shame, because those other two questions would have been fairly easy to answer. As it stands, you find yourself at a loss for words. You think in silence for an uncomfortable duration before stammering something about Flowey being cool. Eventually, you both finish your donuts and head home. The topic is never raised again. Okay, now stop being me. What the fuck even was that? I don't use 4chan. To spare you more overdramatic prose, I did eventually answer that question, just in a text document after I went home, that I decided against ever sharing the next day because it made me sound like a crazy person.
I was gonna say I never got like absolutely crazy into Undertale like a lot of people, but I mean, you can say that about any fandom. You always have the people that go a little too far in their obsession. But for me, I think the farthest I ever went was when I started looking up, of course, I started looking up AUs and reading fan fiction. Actually, never got too far into the fan fiction though. So, yeah, and there were two that I loved. Like, they were my absolute favorite. One was Dreamer Reborn, which if you're a fan of Undertale and haven't heard of that, I mean, where have you been? Where basically, the whole gist of it was, what if Frisk gave their soul to Asriel so that they could stay Asriel, not turn back into Flowey? And then the whole AU kind of went on from there. There was supposed to be a fan game made at some point, but it just seems to have been abandoned, like no new updates. I mean, I'm still sad over that. Another one that I was a big fan of was called Half-Hearted Heroes. It was sort of along the same flavor where it was, Frisk helping Azrael stay Azrael. But instead of just killing himself and giving Azrael his soul, Frisk broke their soul in half, allowing them both to be to take part of it. And then as a result, Frisk turned into a goat monster like Azrael and like Toriel and Asgore and stuff like that. It was really weird, but it was like through Tumblr, and I remember I looked through that for like a good year and a bit before it ended. Oh, I was so upset when that ended, and because they actually reached a conclusion, which I mean, no better place to end than the end, I guess. But then I know like all the other ones like Underswap. I know. Oh god, I used to love listening to Underswap music. Oh.
Thankfully, I have long since transcended such petty concerns. This video, first and foremost, is my answer to that question. But beyond that, it's also a whole lot of philosophical rambling about various mental rabbit holes I ended up falling down while trying to articulate that answer.
My question is, like, how much do these background images have to go? Because I'm seeing, like, pictures like yin-yang, possibly Taoist philosophy. I think that had to do, I think that, like, weird thing had something to do with alchemy? Okay. I'm getting scared.
It should be quite something. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. What was the answer to the question? Why did Undertale, of all games, hit me hard enough to trigger a psychological reenactment of the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event? Well, part of the answer, at least, is obvious. 1. I was a weird loner saddled with nebulous self-concept and starved for emotional stimulus of any kind. How else does anyone get involved in fandom spaces?
Yeah.
2.
Oh god.
Undertale's characters
are really good.
Yeah, as I said, really good writing.
Sure, but the gaggle of wacky anthropomorphic lunatics that Toby put together for his first game are some of the most likable and consistently written bundles of pixels ever committed to a hard drive. This has not changed in the last 7 years. Sans is an icon and a god. If you think that Sans was a good character and is now a meme, you have allowed fandom exposure to ruin the best character in Undertale, and should refrain from making that anyone else's problem. Anyway,
Salt,
that,
yes.
to an extent, is the answer. Put a sufficiently angsty teenager in close proximity to a facsimile of emotional fulfillment, and the two will electrochemically neutralize via the formation of a parasocial fandom bond. It's basic math. However, this answer has one fundamental problem, which is that everyone already knows it. You don't need me to remind you that you had no friends in high school, Jacob, and even fucking IGN managed to figure out that Undertale had good character writing. Lots of games do, actually, and yet, in terms of the impact they left on me, none of them hold a candle to Undertale. There has to be a secret ingredient, and from here on out, I'll be explaining in rambling, esoteric detail my best guess as to what that ingredient might be.
Magic circles.
Then stop. This circle you have drawn represents reality. The world your conscious mind and body inhabit.
Okay, where is this going?
Everything that refuses to go away once you stop believing in it, etc., etc. You can insert whatever profound quote you like best here. You don't need a strict metaphysical definition, I just want to talk about video games. If you're wondering what's outside the circle, it's just Azathoth. Please stop thinking about it. For now, all you need to know is that you are inside the circle, and thus you believe two things to be true. 1. That everything in the circle is real. And 2. That it's possible, and often entertaining, to imagine smaller circles containing things that are not real. These are called fiction, and because these circles are separate from reality, they don't have to adhere to those same two beliefs. In fact, the most common approach to building a fictional world is to completely invert the axioms of our reality, what you might call the know-you method. Where reality insists that the circle's contents are not real, the circle insists that they are. And where reality of course believes in its own existence, the circle denies that anything is present outside of its bounds.
So basically what you're saying is that the little circles have the same rules as the big circle that they are within. And as such, they automatically contradict the bigger circle that is outside of them. At least I hope I'm getting that correct.
Except Azathoth maybe, but that doesn't count. Examples of this style of fictional world
Always
should
with the
be familiar
Azathoth.
to you, since they include basically all works of fantasy media ever created. I'm talking your Marios, your Zeldas, your Final Fantasies. Games that reject the world we know and substitute their own, offering neither explanation nor apology in return. Okay, that's all well and good, but if the fiction isn't there and we're stuck out here, it's pretty hard to justify an $80 price tag on Steam. This is where an extraordinary quirk of human psychology comes into play. The fact that, in the name of entertaining ourselves, we are able to willingly become utterly batshit insane. This high-level yogic technique is known as the suspension of disbelief, and allows one to temporarily disregard the axioms of their own reality and mentally inhabit a fictional one.
Okay. I think I'm beginning to see where this thing is going here. But I mean, isn't that just that's the foundation of any good fiction? I mean, as long as and that's also, also could be like the foundation of a good audience member. Because I know for me, I am. I've said it before, where I am like any Hollywood executive or something. They want like a theater of me filled out, like in any theater. I find it very easy to like enter suspension of disbelief just in general, unless it's like for very specific things. And then like after I like, for example, like what we went to see Star Wars: The Last Jedi, and I will fully admit I got into it really easy, even if there were parts of it that were kind of for me at the time. But it's not until afterwards that I actually thought about the movie for a while that I realized, hey, that movie actually sucked. For me, it takes time and energy to realize that something I watched actually was bad, because I very easily just get like absorbed into things very easily. I think like in like the last while, the last thing that I watched that I didn't get into like at all was Avatar 2, because I went there against my will. I didn't like the first one. I was brought to the second one because my brother and my mother wanted to go, and we wanted to have, like family movie night. So I went to be with them, not to actually watch the movie. And oh God, those few hours. But then when you have something genuinely good, oh yes. Like, I'm gonna stop talking. I gotta like stop this and continue on playing the game. But I've only ever played Undertale once. Once I got the good ending, the perfect end, I have not touched that again since, because I want those characters, or at least the versions that were in my game, to have their happy ending. So I have not touched Undertale since I last played it in... When did I last play it? 2015! Yep, that'll do it.
In this state, you can experience genuine emotional reactions to people, objects, and situations that you know on some level to be purely imaginary.
Yeah.
When you see Pyramid Head lurking down the hallway in Silent Hill 2, your fight or flight response isn't being triggered by the blurry grid of reddish pixels on your computer screen. It's triggered by Pyramid Head,
yes,
lurking at the end of a hallway that you have, at least partially, tricked yourself into believing that you're standing in. I promise I'm going to talk about Undertale soon, okay? Just hang on.
Yeah, isn't that what this video was about?
That creating and maintaining this state of suspended disbelief is a fundamental goal shared by almost all media. Being able to keep the player in a mindset of your choice, feeling what you want them to feel, thinking what you want them to think, is basically the narrative equivalent of a flow state. And all of that is contingent on the player believing, irrationally, in the world you have constructed. On the other hand, the eternal obstacle to this goal is the player's inherent ability to not give a shit. If the player finds the narrative too emotionally taxing, uncomfortable, sappy, distressing, or otherwise inconvenient, they are free at any time to terminate this belief, distance themselves from the game world, reassert the boundary between reality and fiction, and absolve themselves of all investment in the narrative. No matter how fluidly written, beautifully rendered, and enthrallingly plotted the game, suspension of disbelief is always irrational, and always voluntary. And Toby Fox took that personally.
Oh, okay. Fiction 2.
Undertale believes in you. Do I mean in the sentimental power of friendship kind of way? No. Do I mean that any particular character knows you exist and that they're in a video game? No.
I mean, sort of,
Do I mean
but...
anything whatsoever about Kara? No. What I'm talking about here is thematic, a matter strictly between Toby Fox and the players of his game. To explain, let's start with a hopefully uncontroversial point. Undertale's world is, from its own point of view, not a game. It is, however, a world like a game. specifically like a 90s era JRPG. It has a protagonist who can save and load the game, and respawn after death.
Yep.
People level up by killing each other. During a fight, the combatants
Levels
are
of
literally
violence.
required to stop and wait for their opponent's turn to end before attacking, and even the user interface to some extent seems to be acknowledged as a tangible part of the environment. The inhabitants of this world are free to grapple with these quirks of their reality through scientific study or simply lived experience, but the unified meaning behind them...
Oh god, yeah, I remember when I saw saw that on a playthrough, it's like, Gerson just staying in a shop because I know you can't hurt me here. Oh, I loved that.
Joke of sorts that their world literally operates on video game logic is ironically reserved only for us, the players, viewing Undertale's world from an external reality.
Yeah.
None of the game's characters necessarily get the joke, although some may come close, but we certainly do, and Toby knows this and repeatedly leverages that knowledge to convey meaning. This is why I can say with confidence that Undertale knows it has a player, despite no point in the story ever specifically calling that out. Later in the video, I'll spend more time exploring just how much of the game's writing is built around this premise, but for now I only ask that you run with my one basic assumption, that Undertale, within the logic of its own universe, simply has a player.
Okay.
Now, with that basic premise in place, let's explore its implications in the context of my previous rambling about circles of fiction. Parsing Undertale into the model from before, we get this. A piece of fiction that both believes in its own reality and an external reality from which it appears to be fiction. The first axiom has been inverted, and this creates some unusual effects. We still have to suspend our disbelief to enter the circle, since in the real world there is of course no Mount Ebott or Monster Kingdom, and anime isn't real, but once we're in, we do not change. We're not asked to perform the usual mental gymnastics of obliterating our own existence and pretending that all our actions were Norman Reedus's idea or whatever. Let's pick apart the ramifications of this with an example.
Minor visual spoilers.
This is a puzzle from a game called Outer Wilds. Without getting into spoilery details, our protagonist wants to open this big glowing door. However, the mechanisms needed to do so are stuck behind 3 combination locks. So, on a normal playthrough, you need to go on a big adventure and expend immense time and energy gathering the information required to solve the puzzle. However, these 3 locks have the same combinations every single time. And so if you've played the game before, or simply look up the answers online, you can just roll up and sort of do it within 5 minutes of arriving. In the case of Outer Wilds, this breaks the game. Not literally, it doesn't crash or anything, but the internal logic of the narrative is utterly shattered by this one inexplicable action. The information needed to progress came from the player, and because the game's universe cannot admit that a player exists, there is no recourse. The story beyond this point is simply nonsense, unless you accept that the hatchling just got really, really lucky.
I'm gonna say, I've never played Outer Wilds, and I'm probably never going to. Just because I know, like, the fact that you're on this whole time limit and stuff like that, that would stress me out way too much to actually get any enjoyment out of the thing.
What I'm claiming is that by embracing the external influence of a player rather than forcing you to ignore it, Undertale is immune to paradoxes like the one I just described, and furthermore is poised to deconstruct them. There are plenty of minor examples where this is fun to think about. If Frisk walks into the piano room and bangs out Asriel's theme before ever so much as glancing at the music box statue, no problem. That's because the player knows Asriel's theme. If Frisk is fighting Mettaton and decides to submit an essay professing their love for the popular 2018 indie game Among Us, no problem. That's because the player is a degenerate. And so on. But of course, if trivial little headcanons like these were the extent of what a diegetic player could get you, I wouldn't be wasting my time talking about it. So let's consider a slightly different scenario.
Okay.
Frisk, in the wake of a pacifist run where they achieved the best possible outcome for both themselves and every monster in the underground, decides to reset the timeline on a whim and do everything over again, bringing everyone's progress back to 0 to re-experience the same events, the same people, maybe an altered line of dialogue here and there, all for no particular in-universe reason. Well, no problem. That just means that the player, as with the previous examples but more so, has stopped taking Undertale's world very seriously. Maybe they just wanted to replay some of the boss fights. Maybe they needed footage for a video essay. It doesn't really matter. Either way, as described earlier, they have played their trump card and cut off suspension of disbelief, reminded themselves that they are not part of the game's world, they exist above it in a higher reality, and have no obligation to follow its made-up rules or make concessions for its made-up characters. They have escaped the game's logic. They don't have to care anymore. Or do they? Think about it. The premise of that whole previous section
here
is
we
that
go.
the player is part of Undertale's logic, that the game accounts for our presence outside its universe, and that our actions are effectively canon to its story. So what happens when one of those very actions is attempting to revoke our suspension of disbelief? How can that be part of a game's plot? Well, ask this guy.
Flowey,
the
yeah.
Flower.
Oh, God.
Remember him? The first character you meet? The guy from the trailer, and all the promotional material?
Yeah.
2 of the 3 final bosses, actually the most important character in the game? Yeah, that guy. His job in the story is to answer that question, and he does so by holding up a mirror.
Yeah. Again, part of this entire thing, it's just hitting me right. It's just hitting me right in the feels, and I just... Like, it's making me feel good for having never done that. My copy of Undertale shall forever sit as being perfect. No one can ever take that away from me. Your best friend.
Let's review Flowey's monologue from the end of the genocide route. This is by far the most insight we ever get into his character at once, and basically serves as the punchline to that whole side of the game. Here we learn that Flowey's circumstances are, to put it lightly, very unique.
Yeah,
He was
right.
brought back from the dead as a soulless being, immediately and completely stifling his ability to feel empathy or form emotional bonds with other people. Not only that, but he was also given the power of determination, the same power you use to save and load the game. We all know the rest of the story. Unable to connect with those around him, and saddled with the immortality and immunity from consequence granted by determination, Flowey burns through every choice and experience his world has to offer, until he is left utterly, existentially bored. But why all this fuss? Why attach so many weird plot contrivances, the soullessness, the time loop, to the game's villain? In general, that would just risk making him kind of an unrelatable mess. Well, in this case, the question
Not
is
really.
relatable to whom?
Yeah.
You, as the game's player, can of course save and load, so Flowey sharing that power puts him in the unique position to call you out on it. I think that's a pretty standard conclusion.
Yeah,
But it
yeah.
doesn't stop there. Being the player is not just being a time traveler. It means being a tourist from a different reality, needing to shut part of your brain off just to believe the world around you is real. It means measuring the worth of those you meet, the value of their lives, by the quality of their writing, and how long their antics can hold your attention. It means that truly caring about anyone, anything, will ultimately come down to an exercise in make-believe. Flowey is an in-universe, precision-engineered replica
Of the
you.
player, yeah.
Even more specifically, he is what the game wagers you are fated to become after inevitably abandoning all the emotional investment you may currently hold in the quirky, Earthbound-inspired RPG running on your desktop.
But that is where you're wrong, for you shall never beat me.
After the illusion breaks, an Undertale becomes just another game to replay, or another piece of content. And most of the time, the game is absolutely right.
I really don't want to do this.
Oh my god, I'm gonna be so sad, you guys.
So I gotta throw everybody back into this fucked up place.
Gotta get that finger down on the Zed.
Oh, Toriel. Oh my god.
This is horrible.
I'm sorry, Frogget. I'm sorry.
Oh, Frogget, I'm so sorry.
Sorry, Frogget.
Later, Wimson. Love you, buddy, but
The murder dance.
fuck this, dude. Fuck this. I don't know.
Goat Mom, I'm sorry.
That's what you get.
It's taking a while.
Finally, Jesus.
Come on.
I am feeling so morally superior to everybody else right now. Oh, it feels so good.
Go.
Here we go.
I'm doing more and more damage, though, so it's getting to that traditional RPGs thing.
Like, it's so easy to kill them now. They give you so much experience now.
Let's just grind for some enemies here.
I don't want to attack you.
It's time for the Undyne fight. Do you guys think I can ace this?
All right, let's go. This time we got it.
It's gonna be a tough one. I think I make it though.
Oh my god, I'm squandering it.
Let's concentrate, my boys. Determination.
Did it! First try! Fuck you! Oh!
We got it!
40, huh? 40, that's a lot.
Oh my god, this is gonna take forever.
One loves two. That's what I thought. So I was like, oh my god, if I kill two, one might be a lot of trouble.
Oh, here's an excellent spot to grind, so.
Murder dance!
This thing doesn't do that much damage, dude.
My love increased. Alright, cool.
Sans? Fuck, you murdered your brother.
Is Sans hard? What the fuck is this?
What the fuck was that?
You're fucking kidding me.
Trust me, I will get this. I got Undyne, and I will get Sans.
Okay, because you guys want it so bad.
Just do the fucking genocide run.
Get dunked on! I have to do that again?
No more bullshit. When the fight starts, I'm quiet.
Not this time, you motherfucker!
Oh my god, we beat it.
Level 20. Max level.
Hey everyone, today I'll be completing the longest speedrun category of Undertale in existence, True 100%. For those who don't know what True 100% means, it means I'll be getting all 93 possible endings, every item, and unlocking every secret room in the game. The high number is mostly due to the various things Sans can say at the beginning of the ending depending on what you do.
Okay, family ending, with Alfies, without saving. Reset, spare Toriel, date Papyrus, spare Undyne, skip Metaton, don't do Alfie's elevator.
Exiled Queen without Undyne, or saving. Metaton ending with Papyrus without saving. Kill Toriel. Do not use any consumables.
And get the Hush Puppy.
So, be me again.
Breathe it in. Do you smell that? I just got paused by again. That whole end of the game, Flowey popping up and saying that you were the last threat. That's what did it for me. He did maybe with the last vestiges of his humanity that was, or not humanity, but it's like empathy that was still there from when he was Azrael. He convinced me to never return. And I never have. I've kept that promise. And after seeing, and I've seen, like, not remixes, but like mashups of all those people doing, like, going through, like, speedrunning, like, every single possible variant of an ending, or like going through the genocide route and just, admit that it's not Schadenfreude, but like I feel so good watching that. Oh, being able to hold my head high, and say I'm better than you.
It's October 2015, just after Halloween night. You've recently finished an obscure indie RPG you picked up to kill time while waiting for the Binding of Isaac remake to drop. Except, somewhat inconveniently, that RPG was Undertale, and it actually turned out to be the best game you'd ever played. At this point, after plowing through 2 of its endings in 3 days, the first thing on your mind is simply that you want more. Not any particular run or ending. The rumors you'd heard about the supposed Sans boss fight still sounded, to be frank, dubious, but just to spend more time immersed in the world that had so unexpectedly captivated you. To retrace, even partially, the memory of the game's emotional crests and dips. Without a clear plan in mind, you nonetheless open the game up. You see this.
Yeah, this was it. This was what did me in.
You close the game and simply stare at your monitor for a very long time. Now stop being me. Of course, at that moment I didn't have anywhere near enough insight to analyze what I was feeling or why, To be honest, at the time, it mostly just manifested as a formless omnidirectional angst for about 4 solid months. It was pretty bad. But now, with 7 years of retrospect and having written an entire fucking essay to tee up my conclusion, here's what I think happened. To streamline this as much as possible, I'd like to introduce 2 pieces of terminology that I just made up.
Terminology zone!
Mode and external mode of interaction. These terms just sum up all the prior discussion about suspension of disbelief and lack thereof.
Okay.
To interact with fiction in the internal mode is to act while immersed in that fiction, to treat the logic of the fictional world as real and thus feel the emotional weight that your actions would carry in that context.
Okay,
You
yeah,
could
yeah.
also call this the diegetic mode or the belief mode. The external mode, then, is just the exact opposite, interacting with fiction in a rational, detached manner, seeing a story reduced to the symbols that encode it. Words on a page, pixels on a screen. None of it is real, and thus cannot affect your emotions for good or for ill. This could also be called the non-diegetic mode, or the disbelief mode.
Yeah, makes sense. What's so good about Undertale anyway?
By the time I'd finished Undertale's pacifist ending, I was as far into the internal mode as I ever had been, and then some. I'm talking load a save file 20 times in a row trying to beat Asgore without attacking far. Suffice to say, if shit made Papyrus sad, it made me sad. Full stop. With that in mind, with this already extreme headspace as a starting point, when I rebooted the game and stumbled face first into Flowey's surprise soliloquy, he was primed to catch me in the gnarliest psychological wombo combo I had ever experienced. By that point, of course, I had picked up on the general implication that things like saving and loading were taken a lot more seriously in Undertale's story than that of other games, but Flowey's appearance served to take that looming implication and lime it in blinding neon. I realized in that moment that as much as the game had ever been about Frisk, or monsters, or crimes against Italian cuisine, it was always, at the same time, about me. Not a morality test, maybe not even a test at all, but at very least, an experiment. A sort of guided meditation on what the fuck I was even doing by trying to play a story.
Oh,
the
Oblivion.
uncanniness of making myself vulnerable to a narrative while simultaneously acting as its unspoken god. And for all the triumph and spectacle of the battle against Asriel and the shattering of the barrier, that resolution was for the game's characters. For me, Undertale's true finale was here, set against a mute black void, with the option to push a button or not. My freedom to replay the game hadn't changed, but my implicit assumption that resetting my save file was an action safely constrained to the external mode, occurring outside the bounds of the world I'd become so emotionally attached to, was unequivocally annihilated. And when considered
Your
from that
reset is
internal
in
mode, this
universe.
meaningless decision to write bits to a hard drive suddenly meant everything. It meant the story's perfect cathartic resolution wasn't a resolution at all, just a meaningless stopgap waiting to be overruled. It meant invalidating the character arcs I'd been getting misty-eyed at just a day prior. It meant, in short, making Papyrus sad, and I couldn't deal with that. This alone would have been a remarkably strong blow for a narrative to land, something that easily outclassed most other media I'd ever consumed. But as I alluded to previously, Flowey had me in a combo, and all I'd felt so far was the left jab. The game's right hook was still mid-swing.
Oh no.
The thing is, even understanding full well that resetting was a diegetic act, and furthermore an unforgivable one from an in-universe perspective, I still had one option. To get up from my desk, find something to eat, maybe go for a short walk, and just give it some time. Sure, I was pretty worked up now, but before long at all, that sense of immersion would start to fade. Objective reality would seep in like it always does, and suddenly I wouldn't have to care so much about violating the trust of digital skeletons.
No, it does not.
It wouldn't matter if the game thought resetting should be an internal mode decision. It would be external mode if I said so, damn it. I could make it all meaningless if I wanted to, because I was real and the game wasn't.
Oh, you poor, sad, sweet summer child.
And no amount of clever writing could change that. Except, instead of doing any of that, I somehow ended up learning about Flowey's new home monologue, and the right hook landed. Now, I've already talked at length about Flowey's backstory. The takeaway was that his descent into madness closely parallels the mindset of Undertale's player, becoming more and more emotionally distant over successive playthroughs. But what I left out was the actual impact of this parallel. Who knows, maybe after listening to me rant for this long you can already spot it, but I'll go ahead and spell it out. By integrating the concept of fading emotional investment diegetically into Flowey's character, Undertale had placed a grinning little landmine in my fail-safe escape route.
Oh god,
it
no!
had taken the very act of interacting with it in the external mode and moved it to the internal mode. I like to think in these essays that I tend to err on the side of understatement, but at this point I'll have to assume that I either lost you 3,000 words ago,
again.
or that you'll agree with me that this is at least a little bit profound. Suddenly, what had always been my trump card, my option to pull back from the game's reality, to simply stop caring so damn much about its internal logic, was no longer a trump card. It had been swallowed in just the same way that resetting had. I could no longer convince myself that it was special or sneaky or in any way outside the game's purview. It was the literal arc of one of its fucking characters, seen coming a mile away and baked into the bedrock of its story. Despite inhabiting a literal higher reality, sitting comfortably atop what should have been an infinitely tall power gradient, I found myself again and again wrenched down by the collar of my shirt to face the game at eye level. Unable to outthink it, helpless to look away, trapped in a mental vortex with the knowledge that escaping the game's logic was part of the game's logic. Going off script was just another stage direction, and by refusing to play along, I would be delivering the game an Oscar-worthy performance as the guy who refuses to play along. Maybe I'd even play the part better than Flowey. And the longer I wrestled with this weirdly Godelian paradox, the more a much simpler but no less poignant realization came into focus. I wanted to replay this game because I cared about it. Because, irrespective of any amount of waffling about metafiction and levels of reality, I had suspended my disbelief. I had tricked myself somehow into believing that this patently artificial world meant something, that its contents held weight, that its denizens were to be perceived as equals. I had given the game power over me, and in return I was awarded with a wildly memorable experience. If I did as the reset button demanded and took that power back, I would also, in some strange but inescapable way, be recanting those experiences, admitting that the emotions I had felt over the last 3 days were not only absurd, but disposable in their absurdity. And then, what would I still be doing there? Re-experiencing a story at the cost of having obliterated its meaning, having cut the thread of empathy that both held me back from resetting the game, and that let me care about it in the first place. The thought of interacting with Undertale like that, retreading the experience again and again, back and forth until the grooves wore out, and I was left with the inert husk of something once capable of tearing out my guts, well, it didn't exactly vibe. And so, in the end, I just didn't. I never replayed the game, and at this point, I probably never will.
A man of quality. Oh, there's more, is there? Of course, okay.
Anyway, that's what I think was so good about Undertale. There's more I could say, of course. This video is 7 minutes longer than I planned, and parts of it still feel painfully cursory to me, but God knows this project's taken long enough already. One thing I do want to clear up is that I don't mean any of this to come off as high and mighty about having played Undertale the correct way, Steam Corp bullshit like that.
Well, too bad I am.
There are no moral stakes here. Undertale is a piece of media, and it acts on different people in different ways. For me, that action was more or less to run my brain through a tumble dryer for 2 years, but for others, Undertale is just going to be a funny RPG they played once or twice, or 10,000 times, shoutouts to Shay by the way, and there's no paradox there, it's just how art works. My goal with this video was not to paint myself as some sort of gaming martyr who sacrificed himself for the thematic integrity of his favorite RPG, because let's face it, I just spent the next month watching 10 back-to-back playthroughs on YouTube and basically going numb to it all anyway, but simply to share a particularly deranged mind state that Undertale forced me into 7 years ago, and to ogle a bit at how the game managed to achieve that. With that said, and because this video doesn't invite full-on theory crafting discussion quite as much as my previous ones, I'd encourage you instead to share something about your own experience with Undertale in the comments. Frankly, the more deranged, the better. I spent too much time lurking on Steam forums in 2016 to think that I'm the only one this game has driven insane. As usual, I'll be live streaming my responses to as many comments as possible on Saturday the 24th. You may have noticed at this point that I'm talking over footage of a somewhat rowdy-looking Undertale parody game. That, observant viewer, is my Patreon credits, a way to thank all the nice people who throw money at me once a month so I can afford to keep working on these videos. Without them, this channel would not exist. And for the currently quite deflated price of 1 Canadian loonie, you can count yourself among their ranks and have your name made into a bullet pattern.
Wait a second. So this is an actual game. Okay, well, I knew he you know, an actual game developer. He works on games, but I thought this was like fully done in like After Effects or like some sort of editing software. No, this is actually a game. I guess that does like help on the editing at the very least.
Maybe also check out my Discord server to get spammed with @everyone pings for live stream announcements. I don't know, up to you. In any case, thanks for watching, and I'll hope you'll join me for the next one.
Oh. Yeah. He hit the nail right on the head there. I mean, the whole thing is, like, I can't even say how I felt at the time. Like, not, you know, making the conscious decision to never play Undertale again, and then inevitably watching about 1 million Let's Plays of the game afterwards. Because it would just sound exactly the same as what he went through. Granted, but did it take me 2 or 3 days to play? Maybe, I don't know. I played the game for just over 17 hours. Wish it told me how many days that was. I think I can say this with like no sense of hyperbole, but Undertale was something very special. Just in the way it was written, and just and this is to say nothing on like the quality of Deltarune. I mean, from what of Deltarune we've gotten so far, it is very good. It's very fun. But it doesn't have that same like knife to your heart that Undertale did. Like, I know I've played Deltarune like a couple of times since I've done my own playthrough on this channel. And I've done that purely so I can try to get like the better gear and some of the unlockable equipment you get from the secret bosses. And granted, I mean, my feelings might change on that when we get more chapters released, which I hope we get to soon. It's been several years. I mean, put it simply, Undertale was that good. And it will be a long time, I think, before we get something like that had the same punch to it that Undertale did. But I mean, yeah, with all that being said, of course, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet for some reason. Corner video will lead to my Let's Play of the day. And with all that out of the way, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.